It's lovely when somebody like Stefan shares a testimony like that. Something's going on in his real life. But I did have to laugh in the Isaiah because there's a verse there about lying in sackcloth and ashes. And I thought, yes, Stefan would love to have a day lying in sackcloth and ashes with nobody else. But then I read on a little verse, few verses, it says, and do not turn away from your own flesh and blood. So sorry, you've got the kids. Okay. So let us pause and ask God to speak to us directly and excitedly through his word. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that your word has a message for each one of us this morning. May we be courageous enough to hear it and gracious enough to thank you for it. Amen. My first draft for this sermon was about 2 hours long. I narrowed it down to about an hour. And then to try and squeeze it into whatever I'm going to squeeze it into is quite a challenge because there's so much in these 2 lessons. Now, first of all, I want to think about noise. Okay, noise. There are certain people who like loud noises. There are certain people who like quiet noises. There are certain people who like to live with no noise at all. And yet I think our life is full of a mixture. There are certain pieces of music that have to be heard loud. If you go to the Albert Hall and there's a piece on the organ, he's not going to play it quietly. He's going to give it a full welly. If you're into rock and roll, you cannot listen to rock and roll quietly and tap your hands. It's got to be loud. You wouldn't want to go to a waterfall and not hear that torrent rushing down. And how many of you, like me, still go into a tunnel or a place where there's an echo and shout out? Go on, admit it. If no one's looking, of course you do. Or if you've got grandchildren, encourage them to do it. Having no children, I have to do it myself. But yeah, we like that sense of noise. And then there are times when actually we want the quiet noise, like the lapping of the waves on the seashore, or the quiet sound of children asleep, or things that make us whisper, like the Whispering Gallery in Gloucester Cathedral. And then there are times when all of us crave no noise at all, which is kind of virtually impossible these days, but just every now and again, you just don't want any noise, or you just want to listen to the natural noise. And then we move the idea of noise into our worship. And in the Old Testament, worship was noisy and exuberant. We've got it down to saying nothing in church and all going shh at our children. I don't know when it came in that you've got to be quiet in church. When I have children in church, I want them to make a noise. I want them to be quiet. There's a lovely song we used to sing as children. I'm not going to make you sing it now, but it says, "What noise shall we make for God today? Let's make a loud noise. Let's make a quiet noise. Let's make a jumpy noise. Let's make a happy noise." Because God's worship needs to have our whole being. Because when we read the Bible, we can quote God coming to us in quietness and trust. We can recite the passages about the quietness of God's voice. But we also see lots and lots of experiences and times when God shouts at his people. Isaiah 58, verse 1, "Shout it out aloud. Do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet." That's not very quiet, is it? God means to be heard. And then in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. I don't know whether you've ever been to the actual place where he's supported to preach, or any mountain. You imagine a mountain you've been on with hundreds and hundreds, and sometimes thousands of people there, and no microphones. Jesus isn't really going to be whispering, is he? He's actually going to raise his voice. Why? Because he wants to be heard. And yet somehow in church we've got it down to stillness and silence. I remember the very first time I took a service at the Guards with the house, not the Household Cavalry, the Grenadier Guards. And I was out there on the parade ground with 300 of the men there. I was about to take a service. And several of the men said to me afterwards, well, we didn't think we'd be able to hear you because you were a woman. The Sergeant Major got nothing on me. Why? Because I wanted them to be heard. Because I believe in the message that I'm always preaching. But what is God wanting to shout on this occasion, the people of Isaiah? He wants to shout about their rebellion. He wants to shout about their sins. He wants to shout about their double standards, believing that they're fasting and pleasing God. And God shouts at them, on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. There's no point in having a religious, morning, have a good day. There's no point in having a religious fast and then exploit your workers. And God is saying, he's shouting them at both in anger and exasperation. He says, they seem eager for God to come near. God's not doubting their religious sincerity. But they have missed the point, says God. It's not their religious observances. It's their religious observances and their behavior towards others. There is a balance. And what God was shouting in Isaiah was to the people of Israel, well, you've got it wrong. Yeah, you're doing all these religious observances, but actually, you are oppressing other people. You are not looking after the poor. You are not raising up the fallen. You are not welcoming the refugees. And when we put our religious observances next to our attitudes 7 days a week, Isaiah says, God says to Isaiah, the people will call and the Lord will answer their cry. And he will say, here I am. He's not just going to say, here I am, because we've been to church today. He's going to say, here I am, when we've listened to his word and we've gone out and treated our neighbours with love and care and generosity. And then Jesus. What is Jesus shouting on the Mount? Firstly, Jesus is shouting to encourage them. Before this passage, it's the Beatitudes. He's saying to them, blessed are you. Blessed are you when you put your religious beliefs and your attitudes to others together. That's why they're called the Beatitudes. Because it's both about serving God and serving other people. And then he says in that passage to the crowds, he says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Jesus wanted to be clear on that mountain that he was a Jew. He wasn't coming with a newfangled religion. He wasn't coming to denigrate and displace what they already knew. He'd come to reform it. He'd come to allow their religious zeal to continue, but to put it side by side with their actions. Because when Jesus came, as the same as Isaiah, they got lots of religious zeal, but no attitude that was healthy towards other people. Jesus said, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." How many people this week have let their light shine before you? In our prayers, give thanks for those who have smiled at you, or encouraged you, or challenged you. I was coming down from the racecourse on Saturday, so I had my racing gear on and my dog collar, and a complete stranger stopped me and said, "What is God doing about the Ukrainian war?" Because when you wear a dog collar, the joy is that random people are going to stop you with random questions. But they encourage you because they make you think instantly and then reflect later. Jesus was on the mountain shouting or using a loud voice, not because he was angry or exasperated, but because he wanted to be heard. But imagine the scene. There's hundreds of people on the mountain, and the people further down perhaps are a bit deaf. They're not going to hear him. So they're talking among themselves. What did he say? What did he? What's he saying next? And I love those asides in church that very often children make, that I always stop and address. I remember one little child sitting in the front seat with her mum and dad, and she had a loud voice to me so that everybody could hear. She said, "My mum and dad don't believe in God." It's wonderful. You don't ignore it. You go up and speak to them all so that everybody can hear. And you love them into the kingdom. There was another one. I was taking a funeral, and a little girl, again, from the family sitting in the front row, said, "Why is that woman standing by that big box?" She had no clue what she was there for, and yet it was her granddad. Asides are wonderful in church. You can usually tell the asides of adults because it's in their face. They disagree with you or anything, they're shaking their heads. All of our faces are very expressive. But asides are lovely because they challenge and they make us think again. What is Jesus saying? And the trouble with sermons is that they're kind of bland insofar as that we speak, you switch off, we have another hymn and we go home. And there's no place for this dialogue to continue, which is, for me, a great shame. I think I've said it before, I would love there to be sermons where you preached for 5 minutes and debated for another 10. But anyway, that's not for today because I've got a lot to say. So you can't say anything now, just keep quiet. But we have to ask ourselves, if God is shouting in the Old Testament, and Jesus is shouting, raising his voice in the New Testament, then it's clear that God and Jesus are still shouting at us. But the question is, what is God shouting at us? Individually and collectively. When Jesus began this passage today, he said that we had to be as salt and light. We had to be vital as his followers in society. But it's lovely, on Friday and Saturday I get a few clergy friends from around the country who get a bit stuck on their sermons, especially their children's ones. They ring me up and they say, "What shall I say this weekend?" And while we were discussing it, because I'd already thought it, do you realise that this salt and light illustration is no good for 2023? Salt, we are told, is no good for us. And light, we have to switch off. So you imagine saying to the children, "Well, you've got to be lights for Jesus." And the little child saying, "Mummy said we've got to switch the lights off." When we read the scriptures, we've got to interpret afresh what Jesus is saying. And quite simply, he's saying, be vital. Be vital in this society with your faith and my faith. Be vital as the Christian church. But I sometimes think that we're a bit like Sultan Light today, insofar as that we're not very vital and we switch off from sharing our faith. But what is Jesus saying that we've got to be vital way? He says this in Isaiah: if you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always and will strengthen your frame. To be vital in this society, we have to be in the society. We have to know what's going on. And we have to align ourselves as Christians and continue to seek God, what are you shouting at me in this situation? This week, in the Church of England, the General Synod meet again, as it does 3 times a year. But again, General Synod sometimes debates things that cause society, the church, individual Christians to go, I don't like that. Sometimes the General Synod debates issues that make Christians divide. And this week is one of those pivotal weeks for the Church of England. It will be the headline of every newspaper every day of this week. The Archbishop of Canterbury has said that he would rather the church be disestablished than for the church to split. So he is saying he would rather the church stops being the state church than is a church that divides over the issue to do with sexuality. We, who are in the Church of England, we have to wrestle with these issues. So what is God shouting at us this week? God is shouting, pray. He's not shouting the answer to what General Synod is debating. He's shouting to you and to me to pray. To pray so that you and I can be vital in our society and our families today. So that the church can prepare itself for what lies ahead. It's not the first time. In my lifetime, it's done it over virtually every issue. From the prayer book, to women priests, to women bishops, to all sorts of issues. And once again, we're in the headlines. And everyone will have their opinion. And God isn't shouting out the answer. God is shouting out to everyone within the Church of England, pray. Pray for your wisdom when people question you about the debate. Because there are very few people who do not have family or friends or near neighbours who are gay. It is our responsibility as individual Christians to have the wisdom of God, not necessarily collectively, but as individuals. Yesterday we had the Minster singers here. They were marking the 10 years of this church becoming a Minster, and it was a very great concert. But the first anthem they sung was an anthem they'd sung here 10 years ago. And the words were, of this first anthem, "This place was made by God, a priceless sacrament. It is without reproach." And I laughed at the last line, because in God's eyes, no church is without reproach. No individual Christian, no clergy is without a reproach if God is shouting at us. If I'm shouting at myself, well then, I'm pretty good, really, most days. Sometimes if I'm shouting at myself, I'm pretty bad. You see, but if God is shouting at me, no church, no individual is beyond reproach. But we go back to the first two lines. This place, the church, is made by God. It's a priceless sacrament. And what is a sacrament? A sacrament is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. And this week, as we practice our Christian faith, God is shouting at us, pray for my church. My church made by me. It is a priceless sacrament. It is a witness of the grace that I have given to it. And for me, the outcome will always be in God's hands. And I'm not here to preach about the issues. I'm here to preach about the overall shouting that God is doing for us to pray. Because there is much that is going to happen to the Church of England, once again, that our society is going to be questioning. And you and I have to know what our answer is to those. And it matters to me not a jot what your answer is. It's your answer to your family, to your friends, to your neighbours. Well, what I urge you is to pray and find that answer. Paul writes in the third lesson that was on the lectionary today, what we have received is not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may understand what God has freely given us. This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, explaining spiritual realities with Spirit-taught words. Every one of us, every one of you, has got Spirit-filled words to talk to people this week, as the Church of England once again blows up in the face of society. Let us be vital in our faith this week and pray. And for those of you who are interested in it, you can get all the debates on, what's that thing on the computer where you press into General Sid on, you can watch it. What's the word? Alex, what's the word? Yeah, YouTube, and there's sorry? No, it's the live stream. Live stream, that's the word, yes. I'm very with it. But it's live stream. You can go and listen. And to believe you me, if anything will give you high and low blood pressure and make you shout, actually it's listening to General Synod. But it is great because you get what they're saying and not waiting for the newspapers. So if you like that sort of thing, it's on from tomorrow till Thursday. Just go in occasionally and just inform yourselves and hear God shouting. And let us enjoy this week. Despite what may happen, what might be said, what might be the outcome, it's going to go on for months and months and years and years and years. But God still wants us to hear him shouting at us. And he wants us to be vital in society and in our families 7 days a week. Amen.